Hello, I'm Panos Kotzafanasis, and this is ASEAN Movie Pulse interviews. Today I am here with Nuhash, the director of a great short film from Bangladesh titled Moshari. How are you, Nuhash?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine. Nice to have you here. To begin, your short has already won awards in Atlanta Film Festival, short shorts, and from Bifan. Did you expect this kind of success?
No, actually, it's so crazy. The short, Moshari, it's actually like a horror drama. And we don't actually have a lot of horror films in Bangladesh. So even when we were filming it, I think my entire crew was thinking, is he crazy? What's he doing? Because I used to shoot a lot of comedy. And I think the difference between shooting comedy and shooting horror is when you're shooting comedy, it's funny on set, right? Like with the cameraman, everyone's laughing, like everyone's having a good time. But when you're shooting horror, it's not actually scary because there's actually a lot of light. You need it still to be well lit on set. The monster's just a guy standing there. There's no sound effects. There's no like creepy music. So it's not scary in the moment. So when we were filming it, everyone was wondering if it's going to work. So the entire time and during the edit, even when staying at the festivals, I was wondering, do we have something? So yeah, seeing it receive the kind of attention and love it's been receiving all over the world, so many different continents, the awards we've won, it's been very incredible, very reassuring that sometimes you need to experiment and kind of go with your gut with what you're doing in film.
I guess this is probably you don't know exactly why, but do you have any idea why do you think the film is so successful so far?
Well, there are little things that we spend a lot of time with. For instance, this is really small, but even for the music of the film, we didn't want it to sound like any existing horror movie. We didn't want it to sound like an American horror movie or say a Korean horror movie. So we wanted to use South Asian instruments. So we wanted to use flutes and tablas, and we had to recreate sort of the sounds of horror and create a creepy atmosphere using all these different kinds of instruments. So in every layer of the film, whether it's the cinematography or the music, we try to create something new. We try to infuse it with our culture and with our storytelling and our sort of folk tales and things we grew up with in Bangladesh. So I think maybe it's the cultural specificity, seeing something like this from a part of the world we haven't usually seen before. Maybe there is value in that. That's kind of how I'm seeing it. I'd love to know from you as well.
Okay. I will send you my review as soon as we're done. Okay. So, and can you tell me a bit more about the inspiration behind the story?
Well, so Moshari, the word Moshari means mosquito net. And if anyone who's grown up in these parts of Asia will be familiar with going to sleep under a mosquito net. So we have a lot of bugs here. And I have a very specific memory, which is when I was small, the light would trap inside the moshari in a very specific way, and I couldn't see what's outside. So I would imagine I'm asleep under the moshari, and I'd imagine there's something scary on the other side, whether it's a ghost, a monster, a shadow, something. I'd always imagine something in my head. And I thought, is it just me? Am I imagining this, or is everyone else imagining this too? Every other kid who grew up like this. And I talked to other people, and they'd all be like, everyone has like some creepy memory associated with the moshari. So I thought, maybe there's a story there. And I thought if I can go very, very specific and tell this kind of story, maybe there is something universal and something specific. And funnily enough, I've had people, filmmakers from like just audiences from Vietnam, from all over Asia, Africa, reach out and tell me they really connected this. And even people, in America who've never grown up with a martial art, even be like, they still connected to something, because I think every culture has a version of the monster under your bed or the monster in your closet. For us, it's the monster on the other side of the moshari. So I thought, let me take that and let me mine it.
And why did you decide to have two girls as the protagonists?
Well, from the moment I imagined this story, I think I was a lot younger. I think I was 18 years old when I came up with this story. I didn't have the resources to film it then. I wasn't good enough of a filmmaker, so it took a long time to get it together. But it always was a story about sisters. I never sort of questioned it. It was never like a big decision. Oh, the protagonist is a girl. It just always was a girl. I think I'm a very effeminate person. I relate to the protagonist a lot. I relate to the little girl. I relate to the little sister. I relate to the big sister as well sometimes. And I grew up with three sisters. I grew up with my mother and three sisters. So I think like the sibling relationship is very important to me. And my sister, like my mom, she was actually in university when she had me. So she was studying, she was really busy. So in a way, my sisters kind of raised me. So I kind of grew up a lot with my sister. So I think a lot of times in fantasy films or any kind of genre film, we don't see sibling relationships often. We don't see platonic relationships. So for me, I wanted to portray a realistic kind of relationship that has a lot of sort of burden underneath it. And I thought that I was also afraid of pulling off horror, right? Because I was so new to the genre. So I thought if the horror elements doesn't work, I want to get rid of all the horror stuff and it can just work as a drama. So I wanted to make sure that the drama of the two sisters and their journey kind of works as well.
And can you tell me a bit about the casting? How did you end up with these particular actresses?
Well, Honora, Naira Honora, who plays the younger sister, she's actually my niece. So we're very close, and I knew that I could get a good performance out of her because we played a lot of games together, and I knew that she's very creative, she's very smart, so I knew that she could give a very good performance. So it was about finding the right other actress to pair with her who could be the elder sister. So what we did was a lot of chemistry tests where I had Honora there and I had other actresses come and do like maybe they read a few lines or they play a game together just to see who looked like realistic siblings together. And then Sunera, who plays the elder sister, she's a good friend of mine. And at the same time, she was a supermodel and she was starting her career as an actress as well. She's recently won a national award in Bangladesh. She's an incredible actor. But because she's a friend of mine, I didn't really consider her at first. I was like, maybe she wouldn't want to do it. But then I had Honora and Sunera, I had them hang out together. I didn't give them any lines from the script. I was just like, hey, just have a good time. And they bonded so well. It was like they're real sisters. And I saw them and I'm like, I knew that there's something very special in this dynamic and I want to make the most out of it. So they worked together, they rehearsed together, they spent a lot of time together on set, and it was like they were real sisters. And I think Sunera and Honor till this day have a very good bond. They even send each other text messages sometimes. And I think it's a beautiful thing. And I hope a little bit of that at least shows in the film.
Okay. And also, the movie sends a very significant ecological message about the world being destroyed, like slowly. So, what is your opinion on that? How is the situation with the water in Bangladesh right now?
Well, a lot of people, when they see Moshari, they think the story is about the pandemic, right? Because we recently had this whole pandemic disaster thing. But what I always say is, look, I came up with this idea a long time ago, and it was always related to the climate crisis because the way that Bangladesh experiences climate change is very different from the rest of the world because we have not caused this crisis. We have a very small footprint if you compare to the rest of the world, yet we suffered the very most from this crisis. And if you think about it, I worked for international NGOs related to climate change. My executive producer, Rashad, he worked with climate change as well. And what we realized was women and children, they suffer the most. They face the biggest consequences in rural Bangladesh near the coastal areas because of the climate change. And it's either having too much water with floods or having too little water, where there's a lot of floods, there's very little drinking water. And we want to create a world that kind of reflects this because for us, climate change isn't something that's coming in the near future. It's a reality today. And I wanted to show a world that kind of has a metaphorical way of addressing that. But at the same time, I think like, nobody wants to hear another speech or another statistic about climate change. People get bored of that stuff really easily. So we thought if we make a scary movie, if we do it in a horror way, if we put a genre into it, maybe that's a more accessible way into things happening in the real world.
And do you feel that the countries that caused this, let's say the first world, do you accuse them, let's say, in your mind? Is there some sort of accusation towards, let's say, US and America and China? And,
Look, the thing is, I'm not an expert and I'm not going to claim to be. I'm just an artist. So all I can do is ask questions and raise questions and put those questions in people's minds. For instance, even the words we use, right? Even when we say third world and first world, even these names aren't names that we've given to ourselves. These names were given to us. And even in the very jargon, the terms we use to sort of identify the nations has sort of problematic factors. So there's so many elements of this to unload, whether it's neocolonialism or imperialism or the climate crisis. There's so many issues that I think the film kind of touches on. And I think, that's all we can do. We can raise our voices, we can raise questions. And I think there's so many sort of films about climate change from the developing world, from the developed world, where they're like, they make fun of it or they're talking about it, but we don't see it a lot from the places that are the most affected. So I thought it's important to have Bangladeshi voices talk about it, especially through film.
In the film, there is this voice of a man who talks about what is happening right now and how the rest of the world is to be accused of what is happening. But also, I got the feeling from what he was saying that perhaps countries like Bangladesh, that they are experiencing this climate change right now, are also would be more equipped if something like that happened in a global scale. Do you feel that also?
Yes, I think, in fact, the pandemic was a big, kind of a big revolution in that sense, where we saw that a lot of the so-called first world countries didn't handle it in the best way, but then there were a lot of smaller places that were kind of smarter and kind of had better ways to cope with the pandemic. And I think, you never know, because like in TV and movies, like another kind of idea behind making the film, not a political one, but it was just like, whenever we see the end of the world in a movie, it's usually in New York or it's in London. It's like that's we never see what's happening in Bangladesh. So it's just like setting it there, because the rest of the world, they always like to see themselves as superpowers, and in their films and their TV stuff, they're always shown as superpowers. But I think the reality is a little different from that. I don't think there is a single superpower anymore. And I think that a lot of innovation, a lot of hope, a lot of humanity comes from places like Bangladesh all the time. And I think our media should reflect that in the future.
And the mosquitoes are also a kind of metaphor. I got that you use them in a number of ways in the film. For example, the older sister at one point says, mosquitoes are like old men, they're like little girls. So can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, so I think that, there, I was just talking to somebody day before yesterday who saw the film, and she was saying she thought the film was about abuse, and she thought the film was about the kinds of abuse that women go through, and it's a story about abuse. And I think that's very valid. And in fact, she didn't see anything about climate change at all. I was like, did you notice the climate theme? She's like, no, I didn't see any of that. And I think that's the beauty of cinema. Everyone has a different interpretation, and they're all valid. And I think whatever connects with you emotionally. So yeah, I would say that what we tried to do was put the layers in there so that you can get what you want from it. You can be entertained, scared, or whatever emotion you want to feel, but at the same time, give you something maybe to think about, hopefully, so that it gives you something, not just during watching the film, but when you go home or when you're done a little later, there is something that can go on in your head.
But would you say that Bangladesh is a patriarchal society?
Bangladesh?
Yes.
I think see I think that's very difficult to I think it's oversimplified to say it's either patriarchal or matriarchal, because while like I think Bangladesh has actually recently seen a lot of development with women leading the way out of poverty, women leading the way in agriculture, and kind of leading the homes and leading the family in a lot of different ways. So I think like the way women work in society, it's not usually valued the same way, because we try to put monetary value on everything. So maybe a man goes to work, maybe even a woman, when she stays home, or the work that she does in the household, that can have just as much value or more value. So in a lot of ways, I would say that it's a nation that's being led by women, and our leader, our prime minister, is a woman. So in a lot of ways, I think we're developing a lot and getting rid of the gender stereotypes, or we're trying to do our part.
Okay. And there's also another phrase in the film. The girl at one point says, "I can't breathe." Is this a notion to what happened in the US with the police, and or that's just my opinion?
No, actually, that just happens to be an unfortunate coincidence.
Oh, okay.
But that script was written way before that incident, and we actually filmed it before that as well.
Oh,
So I wouldn't
okay.
think that.
Okay. So you said you thought of that story when you were 18. How old are you now?
I'm 30 years old now.
Okay, so it was a long time ago. Okay,
It's a long time ago.
okay. And can you tell me a bit about the cinematography in the film and what you wanted to do in the visual aspect of the movie?
Yes, so our director of photography was Ajaz Mehdi, and I think he's a brilliant cinematographer. He's done some wonderful music videos before this, but I think this was actually his first kind of short film. And I think what we wanted to create was, I was talking about sort of my childhood where the Moshari would trap light in a certain way. So we wanted to play with light and darkness in a very specific way where we didn't want to show the threat. We wanted it to be hidden in darkness because I think there is the fear of the unknown. Sometimes when you can't see something, that's scarier. And I think we used a lot of green, we used a lot of red, green and red. That's the color of the Bangladeshi national flag. So we wanted that to be represented in a way. So yeah, we wanted to create visual language for what does a Bangladeshi horror film look like, because it just doesn't really exist yet. So that was a lot of fun, and there was a lot of ideation in developing that, and even like taking the net itself and finding different ways to film the net, sort of how can we go inside it and come outside it, and how can we create a different language of storytelling. So that was really fun to develop.
And can you tell me a bit about the music and also the sound in general, which I thought was very important for the horror scenes in particular?
Yes, I think that the Bangladeshi film industry is definitely growing, but I think something that I always struggled with was post-production and sound design. But I was actually in the Asian Film Academy, that's in Busan. It's a film program there where directors, cinematographers, different film professionals come together, and that's where I connected with Yemen, who was like a Singaporean filmmaker, sound designer, and we connected. And I was talking about this short that I'm going to be working on. So yeah, I actually did the sound design in Singapore, and I think that kind of helped as well. I got access to a lot of more sort of professional equipment there, and I think that sound is very important in a film like this, and working towards that. And the music we did, as I was saying, Tamir, he's a young musician from Bangladesh. He did the music, and it was very important to use local instruments and find a new sound for the score, something that represents whether it's the mosquitoes, whether it's the blood sucking nature of it, like that should come through in the score. So yeah, we actually spent a lot of time developing that. I think, especially for short films, I think the difference between an amateur short film and something that looks a little more professional is the sound design, not the cinematography. Because I think young filmmakers, they don't always pay attention to the sound. So it's very important for me going in, because I watch a lot of short films, going like, okay, we need to invest time and effort and energy into the sound as well.
And you did your own editing, right?
Yes, I edited
How?
it myself, and the visual effects as well.
So how was that? Is it difficult editing your own self?
It was actually very difficult editing myself, because you have no one to tell you whether you're doing it right or wrong. So we spent a lot of time editing it. But at the same time, as I said, we don't have a lot of culture of horror filmmaking here in Bangladesh. So it was a lot of, I didn't know anyone else who would be able to do it. So it was just kind of me experimenting on and on, so getting rid of scenes, adding moments, and also the VFX. There's some VFX shots and some compositing to create the world of the film. And we didn't have a budget to get someone else for the VFX, so I had to learn how to do it myself, and then do the visual compositing myself as well.
Okay. And also, to tell you the truth, the film, particularly for a short one, looks expensive to me. I mean, was it that the case? It like for a short film? I mean, was the budget big? Because the end result is like impressive. I don't know.
Not at all. I think it's a pretty small, but whenever I tell people what the budget is, they go like, "What? That's crazy." We try to be very economic with the shots. Like even with the outdoor scenes, we know exactly what shots we needed, and we didn't film anything extra. So we tried to be, we tried to make the most of what we have. We searched a lot for the locations. We actually filmed it in an abandoned Coca-Cola factory that we
Oh,
found,
really?
and we like begged them to give us permission to shoot inside. So yeah, it's, when you're a filmmaker without a budget, you have to be smart and you have to be resourceful and kind of find the best way to sort of put more on screen.
How many days were you shooting?
We shot for 4 days.
Oh, just 4 days. Okay, all right, great. And also, can you tell me a bit what is your opinion about the Bangladeshi movie industry at the moment?
Well, I think the movie industry is, I think being a country like Bangladesh next to a much bigger industry, next to India, next to Bollywood and all that, sometimes it can be overshadowed. Sometimes a lot of people I meet don't even know where Bangladesh is. They think it's a part of India. They don't know we're our own country. So sometimes we're very overshadowed by whether the other places around us. But I think that also has its advantages because it lets you grow in your own way and develop something very, very new and very, very different. And I think that's where Bangladeshi cinema is headed. It's going to be something that's very different from Bollywood, different from the things around it. And I think that's very exciting. We had recently, last year, we had the first Bangladeshi film in the competition at Cannes. That was Rehana Mariam Noor. So brilliant film. So that was very exciting. And yeah, a lot of great films coming out from here in the, in the indie space, in the festival space. So yeah, I think it's an exciting time to be a Bangladeshi filmmaker, and I think we're going to see more and more works from this part of the world that are different, that stand out because they have to stand out to survive, and because there's so many just films now, everyone's making content. So yeah.
And, does the audience in Bangladesh watch local movies in cinemas, or they prefer foreign movies? Let's say.
We actually we have a policy. We actually don't bring in a lot of foreign movies. Maybe some big Hollywood movies, like the superhero stuff, comes in. Other than that, there are not a lot of foreign movies. I think not only is the film industry growing, but also the online content space with web series and like web content. Just like there's Netflix. Netflix is very big here, but there are also other platforms, local platforms, that are growing. And I think there's a future for that space as well, because streaming is going to be huge in the future. Well, already is.
Okay. And the last question, I guess, any plans for the future?
Well, Moshari actually is probably going to be developed into a feature film soon. So that's going to be exciting. We're in talks with a very big producer, who's actually an Oscar-winning producer. Can't name names yet, but that's a very exciting development to develop the story for Moshari into something bigger, going deeper into those themes. So that's very exciting. Other than that, I'm also going to be filming Moving Bangladesh, which is supposed to be my first feature. It's based on a true story about a startup in Bangladesh. So it's kind of a technological story. So yeah, they're two very different stories. One is like a drama, another's like a kind of a fantasy horror, but very excited about moving forward.
Okay, so you have already thought how Moshari is going to be a feature film? What else is going to happen there?
Yes, actually.
Okay. All right, that's great. That's it. Thank you very much, Nuhash. Nice having you here.
Thank you so much for the great questions.
Okay, great. This was ASEAN Movie Pulse interviews, and see you soon. Bye.